So fact-checkers weighed in heavily on his claim that the bill offered zero protection for the innocent.
They did. And what did that fact-checking reveal about the technical mechanisms in the bill?
Well, the scrutiny revealed a really critical gap between Higgins' strong rhetoric and the bill's actual text. Fact-checkers confirmed that the legislation does include robust provisions for redactions. Specifically, it allows the DOJ to redact information necessary to protect victims, witnesses, and uninvolved third parties. Precisely the group Higgins claimed the bill would injure.
So his opposition wasn't about the total absence of protection, but the sufficiency of it. That is a nuanced but crucial difference.
It is. He argued the mechanisms were insufficient to prevent this procedural abandonment, while his opponents argued the framework for protection was clearly there.
And this framing is so vital because it allows him to maintain his principled stance that the potential for injury remains too high, even while the bill's language technically contradicts his claim that procedure was abandoned.
It really highlights this perpetual tension. When the public demands radical transparency, what risks should the justice system be forced to take regarding procedural norms?
That raises such an important question. We have a politician who is known for being a hardline, immediate action advocate on crime, the kill them all guy,
Right.
suddenly becoming the loudest defender of the slowest, most methodical norms of criminal procedure, arguing for the protection of confidentiality. Is this an inherent contradiction we need to address here?
I think it's a profound political contradiction, and it's arguably the most fascinating part of this whole deep dive. The Cajun John Wayne persona demands clear, swift, non-bureaucratic action against enemies.
Yet here he is defending bureaucratic norms, confidentiality, due process for third parties that often frustrate the public's desire for immediate justice.
So this can be viewed in two ways, right? Either it shows a genuine deep-seated belief in procedural integrity, despite all his rhetorical flair.
Or it shows an opportunistic strategic choice, one that allows him to appear conservative on two fronts. Tough on crime because, Epstein is guilty, and ideologically pure on process because the state must follow the rules.
Exactly. It's a very sophisticated maneuver. By choosing to defend process, he is signaling to a different segment of the far-right base, those focused on strict constitutionalism and skepticism toward government overreach, that he is their champion.
And the vote showed a clear divergence from the Republican mainstream. Speaker Mike Johnson, a fellow Louisiana Republican and a conservative leader, he supported the bill.
For Higgins to break ranks with his own state's leader and the vast majority of his House Freedom Caucus colleagues, many of whom champion transparency, it suggests that either the procedural issue was genuinely paramount to him,
or the strategic political value of being the only dissenter, the ultimate loner no vote, outweighed any benefit of conforming to the party consensus.
the narrative of isolated principle is just extremely valuable to him.
And that narrative is only amplified when we look at the long history of controversies that define his public perception.
Right, because Clay Higgins operates in what seems like a state of continuous controversy. And these past incidents are a crucial context for understanding how his lone vote is interpreted by critics and supporters alike. He's not some new figure suddenly taking a bold stand. He's a career contrarian. So let's walk through the most significant incidents that are documented in our sources.
These incidents, they establish a very clear pattern of extreme rhetoric, a skepticism toward established institutions, and a willingness to use inflammatory language to drive a political point. It all contributes to this broader narrative of a controversial, uncompromising figure.
Okay, let's start with one of the most recent and inflammatory incidents. The Haitian immigrant post in September 2024. This one led to some pretty severe political repercussions.
The language he used in that social media post was deeply aggressive and, well, dehumanizing. The source material details his use of terms that referred to Haitians as wild, and it mentions specific negative cultural practices like eating pets, voodoo.
He also characterized Haiti as the nastiest country in the Western Hemisphere and its people as slapstick gangsters.
Right. And that rhetoric uses these broad, racially charged generalizations to paint a massive group of people as inherently criminal or culturally inferior.
The political consequence was immediate and it was harsh. This level of language prompted the Congressional Black Caucus, the CBC, to introduce a resolution for censure.
What did that censure resolution specifically target?
It focused on the specific, racially inflammatory and dehumanizing nature of the language he used. It cited it as an abuse of his position and a violation of the norms of respect within Congress.
And while censure resolutions rarely pass, just the act of introducing it by a major congressional caucus shows the severity of the condemnation.
It absolutely does. It shows the degree to which his rhetoric crossed these established lines of political discourse, and it reinforces his image as a figure who embraces confrontation and rejects political correctness.
Now, let's pivot back to an incident that really set the tone for his early career. The Kill Them All Facebook post from 2017. He posted it right after a London terror attack.
This statement was maybe the clearest example of that uncompromising law and order persona taken to a political extreme. The specific quote, directed at what he called Islamic horror, was, "All of Christendom is at war with Islamic horror. Hunt them, identify them, and kill them all."
The language is just absolute, isn't it? It leaves no room for judicial procedure, diplomacy, or detention, only immediate comprehensive execution.
And that's the core criticism. His defense was that the statement referred narrowly and specifically only to radicalized Islamic terrorists.
But the sweeping, generalizing phrasing, particularly the command to kill them all, drew major criticism globally for its perceived extremism and its disregard for the necessity of, a clear legal identification of combatants.
That post really cemented his reputation early on as a politician who advocates for extreme, non-procedural forms of justice.
And that creates a direct thematic conflict with his current stand on the Epstein Files, right?
Absolutely. He's demanding meticulous procedural protection for uninvolved third parties, but at the same time, advocating for the immediate, non-procedural execution of perceived enemies in another context.
It creates this fascinating political tension. It suggests that for Higgins, adherence to procedure is not a universal principle, but it's a tool to be deployed when it serves his political narrative.
Whether that narrative is protecting confidentiality or, conversely, demanding aggressive action.
Yeah, the ambiguity is strategically useful for him.
And we should also connect this controversial history back to his foundation in law enforcement. Our sources note there were past allegations of misconduct during his time as a deputy.
Yes, this is crucial for the full picture. During his tenure in various local police capacities, Higgins faced several internal investigations and allegations related to his conduct.
For example, there were specific allegations about him using unnecessary force on a handcuffed suspect.
Right, and while the outcomes of all these investigations vary, the mere existence of a pattern of scrutiny about his operational methods, it reinforces the narrative of a figure who operates with extreme intensity and sometimes finds himself on the wrong side of procedural rules.
So this complexity, a procedural defender who has also been accused of procedural breaches, is central to understanding his public image.
It is. Finally, let's discuss his associations and his willingness to float conspiracy claims, which connect him firmly to the fringe of the political landscape.
The source material details his public association with groups aligned with the far-right militia movement. He's appeared at events tied to organizations like the Three Percenters and the Oath Keepers.
And for you, the listener, the Three Percenters adhere to this idea that only 3% of American colonists fought the British, and they position themselves as modern patriots ready to resist federal tyranny.
And the Oath Keepers are known for recruiting former military and law enforcement with the belief that they have to defend the Constitution against government overreach.
This association is a powerful signal. It signals absolute defiance toward the federal government as a legitimate governing body when it conflicts with his ideology.
And on top of that, he has actively promoted claims that challenge established facts, like floating the conspiracy theory of ghost buses carrying agents who allegedly infiltrated the January 6th Capitol attack.
This behavior, the association with militia groups and the promotion of debunked conspiracy theories, it just solidifies his reputation as a figure who is deeply suspicious of mainstream institutions, including federal law enforcement and established media.
So if we connect all these controversies, the racist rhetoric, the call for executions, the alleged misconduct, the militia ties to the bigger picture, it explains why his lone no vote is interpreted so skeptically by so many.
It creates a context where his claim of a principled procedural objection is viewed through a filter of political calculation. These past incidents make it easy for critics to argue that his primary motivation is not procedural sanctity, but simply maximizing the visibility of his opposition to the federal establishment, in this case the DOJ, while simultaneously signaling purity to his highly energized anti-institutional base.
It really paints the picture of a politician who strategically selects conflicts and isolation points just to maintain maximum relevance and distance from the DC consensus.
Okay, let's synthesize the three pillars of this deep dive: the lawman persona, the far-right ideology, and the uncompromising dissent. Clay Higgins' entire political strategy is predicated on maintaining a brand of uncompromising authenticity, and the lone no vote on the Epstein Files Transparency Act is the latest and most globally visible expression of that strategy.
The loner no vote narrative is the perfect vehicle for his career. His political style, blunt, uncompromising, anti-establishment, it fuels the interpretation that his vote was either a truly principle-based defense of procedure,
Or a carefully executed political calculation to signal ideological purity to his base.
and the ambiguity inherent in this situation serves his brand perfectly. It gives him maximum credit among his supporters.
What's fascinating here is the sheer tension between the components of his brand. He is known for being aggressive on national security and demanding immediate non-procedural justice, the Cajun John Wayne, right?
Right.
Yet here he stands, defending the meticulous norms of criminal procedure, specifically protecting the confidentiality of uninvolved individuals, even if it frustrates the public's thirst for information on high-profile crimes. He's using procedural conservatism as a shield.
And that strategy allows him to leverage his law enforcement background to criticize the bill as procedurally reckless. The argument of protecting innocent third parties is highly defensible to the public. I mean, who wants their name dragged through a global scandal just because they were mentioned in a peripheral document?
Precisely. It allows him to appear rational and legally grounded, even amidst the chaos of his usual rhetoric. But the question remains, what should you, the listener, watch for going forward? How does this event change the trajectory of his career or the legislation itself?
Well, first we need to monitor the legislative impact. Even though the Senate passed the bill unanimously and it's awaiting the president's signature, the intense scrutiny on Higgins' rationale about insufficient protections could potentially prompt future legislative clarity.
So his stand could lead to amendments or stricter rules being considered for future transparency bills, focusing more closely on the exact definition of redaction and protection.
It's possible. Second, we have to watch how this high-profile dissent affects his standing within the House. We noted his divergence from Republican leadership like Speaker Johnson. Will this solitary stand empower him further within the House Freedom Caucus as the ultimate symbol of ideological defiance? Will that grant him more internal negotiating power?
Or will it further marginalize him from the broader Republican coalition that ultimately needs to pass complex legislative packages?
The lone dissenting vote is a double-edged sword. It's great for primary elections and visibility, but terrible for actual influence within the legislative process.
That's the calculation. And finally, his media profile. The global interest in the Epstein Files ensures that his name and his reasoning are now tied to this international scandal. Will this episode shift his media profile?
Will he be seen more consistently as a watchdog for procedural justice? Or will the media continue to frame his actions primarily through the lens of his past extreme rhetoric, like the Kill Them All post and his militia associations?
The global interest guarantees that his rationale will be revisited constantly.
It is clear that by choosing isolation, Clay Higgins ensures that he remains a defining figure in the storm of American political confrontation.
So to recap our deep dive, Clay Higgins, the former lawman and far-right politician defined by his abrasive Cajun John Wayne persona, became the lone dissenter on the Epstein Files Transparency Act.
His stated stand was driven by a commitment to procedural concerns, specifically protecting the confidentiality of thousands of uninvolved individuals, which forced him into a high-stakes, single-person fight against nearly the entire Congress.
And this moment underscores a fundamental tension in modern governance. The balance between the intense public demand for absolute transparency in high-profile cases and the sanctity of procedural due process within the criminal justice system.
Higgins, in a typically dramatic move, chose to advocate for the latter, but in the most politically visible way possible.
So here is our final provocative thought for you. This specific procedural stand, taken by a politician known for extreme, non-procedural calls for immediate action against perceived enemies, highlights the strategic use of procedural adherence as a political tool.
To what extent should transparency and procedural due process be balanced, especially when dealing with the reputations of uninvolved third parties? And how does the messenger's history of extreme rhetoric affect the credibility of a message rooted in legal principle?
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
We'll catch you next time.